Welcome to the channel Prophecies of Tomorrow, a place where we seek together to understand the spiritual truths that illuminate our journey. Today, you will be invited to take an essential step on your journey, recognizing the need for spiritual direction. After all, how many times have you felt like something was missing, even though everything around you seemed to be in order? We live in a fast-paced world where the search for answers mixes with the constant noise of information. However, in the midst of this whirlwind, there is a subtle voice that calls us to a greater purpose. This voice, often drowned out by daily worries, is the voice of God, who invites us to a life guided by His wisdom and love. The Bible teaches us, commit your way to the Lord, trust in Him, and He will do the rest. But are we really willing to surrender our path to Him? Think about it. How many decisions have you made relying solely on your own ability, only to discover that they didn't bring you the peace you hoped for? This feeling of dissatisfaction, of emptiness, is a reminder that we were created for something greater, something that goes beyond our human limitations. Recognizing this is the first step towards a transformed life. Now I ask you, what would your life be like if you could count on perfect guidance, coming directly from God? Are you willing to give up control and trust the divine plan, even without seeing the complete path? Respond in the comments. This is the time to reflect and give space for God's light to begin guiding your every step. This journey begins with an act of humility, admitting that, alone, we cannot achieve fulfillment. Are you ready to take that step? Remember, recognizing the need for spiritual direction is not weakness, but the greatest sign of strength you can demonstrate. As we take the first step of recognizing our need for spiritual direction, we face a new challenge. How do we integrate this dependence on God into daily decisions? It doesn't matter if we are planning a big life change or deciding something seemingly simple. Divine wisdom is the key to truly right choices. But how can we access this wisdom and apply it to our daily lives? The Bible offers us precious advice. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives to all freely and willingly, and it will be granted to you. This verse shows us that God is not only willing to guide us, but wants us to continually seek His guidance. The question is, are we really asking for this wisdom? Or do we follow the logic of the world, trying to solve everything ourselves? Many of us make the mistake of underestimating the importance of small decisions. We think that only great choices need prayer and spiritual reflection. However, it is in the details of life that we shape who we are. Think about the last decision you made. Was it based on spiritual principles, or was it a reflection of the spur of the moment? A common example is when we face financial challenges. Instead of seeking God's direction, many fall into the trap of anxiety, making hasty decisions. However, God teaches us to trust Him in these moments too. He reminds us that just as He takes care of the birds of the air, He will take care of our every need. Another critical area is relationships. How many times have we become involved in friendships or even romantic relationships without consulting God? These connections can profoundly shape our future. Divine wisdom helps us to discern who should walk alongside us and who can take us away from God's purpose. An essential tool for seeking God's wisdom is prayer. Praying is not just asking, but also listening. Have you ever tried spending a few minutes in silence after a prayer, waiting for God's answer? This habit can transform the way you view your decisions. Furthermore, daily reading of the Bible is essential. There we find clear guidelines for living a life that pleases God. But here's an important point. Divine wisdom does not always appear logical to human eyes. God can lead us down paths that we do not fully understand at the time. That's where trust comes in. Trusting God's direction means following His guidance, even when it defies our own logic. I challenge you to reflect now. Which areas of your life urgently need God's wisdom? Maybe it's a project at work, a family decision, or even a plan for the future. Share in the comments how you are seeking this wisdom, or, if you haven't started yet, what stops you from taking this step. Trusting God does not mean abdicating the responsibility to act, but aligning our actions with His will. When we do this, we discover that even the most difficult obstacles can become stepping stones to a greater purpose. After all, divine wisdom does not free us from challenges, but it enables us to face them with faith, courage, and clarity. Are you ready to actively seek divine wisdom in your life? The invitation is out. God is always willing to give the answer, but the question needs to come from us. Seeking divine wisdom is a fundamental step, but there is one aspect that we often underestimate: listening and obeying. If we only seek God's guidance but are unwilling to follow it, we are like a navigator who receives clear instructions but chooses to ignore them. This is where many face their greatest spiritual challenges: obedience. Jesus told the parable of the wise man who built his house on the rock. He compared this man to one who hears God's words and puts them into practice. On the other hand, the man who listens but does not obey builds his house on the sand. When the storm comes, the difference is evident. Only one house remains standing. This is a powerful metaphor for our lives. What's the point of receiving divine advice if we're not ready to act on it? Obedience often requires courage. It's easy to follow God's plans when they align with our desires, but what about when He calls us to do something that seems uncomfortable or even illogical? Think about it. Is there any area of your life where you know what God expects of you, but have resisted obeying? Maybe it's a relationship that needs adjusting, an attitude that needs to be abandoned, or a new step of faith that seems too challenging. This resistance often comes from fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of judgment from others, or fear of failure. However, obedience to God never leads us to ruin, but rather to a place of peace and purpose. The Bible reminds us, if you are willing to listen and obey, you will eat the best of the land. This is a promise that obedience brings blessings, even if the initial path seems difficult. Another crucial aspect is learning to hear God's voice. It doesn't usually come in screams or spectacular manifestations, but in quiet whispers. Elijah the prophet expected to find God in the strong wind, earthquake, or fire, but he revealed himself in the gentle breeze. This teaches us that, to hear God, we need to be still. Have you ever stopped to think about how much noise your life is? News, social networks, responsibilities. Where is the space for God to speak? A practical tip is to set aside specific moments in your day to listen to God. It can be at dawn, in a moment of prayer, or when reading the Bible. Ask Him, Lord, what do you want from me today? Then remain silent, waiting for the answer. Many times He speaks directly to the heart, bringing a conviction or reminding you of a verse you have already read. Obeying will not always be easy, but it is transformative. Each act of obedience is like a seed planted in fertile soil. It may not bear fruit immediately, but over time it will produce a bountiful harvest. Maybe you've been putting off an important decision because you're waiting for the right time. Remember, the best time to obey God is now. Share in the comments. What was the hardest decision you ever made when obeying God? Your experience may inspire others who are facing similar challenges. As you share, you also strengthen your own faith by remembering the transformative power of obedience. The spiritual journey was never promised as a hardship-free path. In fact, Jesus warned us, "In the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world." The question is not whether we will face challenges, but how we will respond to them. And here's some crucial advice. View every difficulty as an opportunity to strengthen your faith and build resilience. When we face adversity, our first reaction is often to question, why is this happening to me? But what if we change that question to, what does God want to teach me through this? This shift in perspective can completely transform our approach to problems. Every obstacle we face has the potential to bring us closer to God if we are willing to look beyond the pain. Remember Job, who lost everything but remained steadfast in his trust in the Lord. He said, "Though he slay me, I will wait for him." Job teaches us that faith does not depend on circumstances, but on an unshakable trust in the character of God. Have you held on to that trust in difficult times? Another powerful example comes from the Apostle Paul, who declared, "I have learned to be content in any and all situations." He faced arrests, shipwrecks, and persecution, but he never lost his faith. How did he achieve this? Paul knew that his strength came from God. "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me," was not just a catchphrase, but a reality lived in the midst of adversity. In life's challenges, we have two choices: to draw closer to God or to move away from Him. The second option is dangerous because it isolates us and leaves us vulnerable. The first, although it requires humility and surrender, connects us to the source of all strength and wisdom. Now, think about the difficulties you are currently facing. It could be a health problem, a financial challenge, a family conflict, or even spiritual doubts. How have you dealt with these situations? Have you been searching for answers on your own, or have you given your burdens to the Lord? A practical way to deal with challenges with faith is to start the day by declaring your trust in God. Say, "Lord, I don't know how to resolve this, but I trust that you have control." Make this a habit and see how your perspective changes. Also, be surrounded by people who share the same faith. Fellowship with other Christians is one of the ways God strengthens us. Sharing your challenges with a spiritual friend or your faith community can bring comfort and guidance. Have you tried asking others to pray with you and for you? Finally, remember that challenges are temporary, but the lessons we learn from them are eternal. The Bible tells us that all things work together for good to those who love God. This means that even in the worst circumstances, God is working to transform the situation into something that will work for our good. In the comments, share a challenge you overcame with God's help or something you're finding strength for right now. Your story could be the inspiration someone needs to keep trusting. Are you ready to look at life's challenges with new eyes? Seeing them as opportunities to grow in faith and resilience may be the missing step to completely transforming your spiritual journey. Getting this far on the spiritual journey leads us to an essential reflection. What is the purpose of your life? Have you ever asked yourself why you are here and what God expects from you? These questions are universal and profound, but the answer starts with a fundamental concept: gratitude. When we live with gratitude, our heart aligns with divine purpose, and life takes on extraordinary meaning. The prophet Jeremiah reminds us, "I know the plans I have for you, plans of peace and not of evil, to give you a future and hope." This promise assures us that God has a perfect plan for each of us. However, to discover this plan, we need to be aware of what He has already given us. How many times have you been grateful for something that today you consider small, but that, in the past, seemed like a distant dream? Gratitude is not only a natural reaction to blessings, but also an act of faith. When we give thanks, even in the midst of challenges, we are saying to God, "I trust you, even if I don't understand." And that has transformative power. Have you tried listing 3 things you are grateful for every day? This simple habit can change your perspective and strengthen your connection with God. But gratitude and purpose are closely linked. When we are grateful for what we have, we begin to see how we can use our blessings to fulfill a greater purpose. Think about the talents God has given you. Are you using them for His glory, or are you burying them out of fear or procrastination? Jesus told us the parable of the talents to teach us that we are responsible for what we receive. Fulfilling God's purpose does not mean doing great things in human eyes, but being faithful in small things. Perhaps you are called to show love in your family, help a neighbor in need, or impact your community with simple acts of kindness. These acts, although they may seem small, are of great value to God. And there is something even deeper. Living with purpose brings fulfillment. The feeling of emptiness that often haunts us comes from a life disconnected from divine purpose. When we align our actions with God's will, we experience a peace that passes all understanding. Have you ever stopped to think about what stops you from living a life more aligned with God's purpose? It could be fear of failure, lack of confidence, or even daily distractions. The first step to overcoming these obstacles is to surrender them to God in prayer. Ask Him to reveal what needs to be adjusted in your life and trust that He will provide the means to do so. Gratitude also teaches us to value the present. Often, we are so focused on what we want to achieve that we forget to take advantage of what we already have. This leads us to a constant state of dissatisfaction. But when we learn to be grateful for the gift, we experience joy and peace. share. In the comments, what are you grateful for today? Perhaps your gratitude will inspire others to see the blessings in their own lives. Additionally, think about how you can use your gifts and resources to positively impact those around you. Building a life of purpose and gratitude is an ongoing process. It's not about reaching a final destination, but about walking daily with God, trusting that He is guiding us. We have reached the most important moment of our journey, understanding the transformative power of communion with God. In a world that constantly tries to keep us away from Him, communion is the foundation that keeps us firm and connected to eternal purpose. And now I ask you, are you living a life of true communion with God or just fulfilling empty rituals? Communion with God is not just attending a church or performing mechanical prayers. It's a living, vibrant relationship. When you talk to God in prayer, do you feel like He is really listening? When you read the Bible, do you feel like the words jump off the page and touch your heart? This is the essence of communion, a deep connection that transcends the natural and brings us into the presence of God. Think about the last time you experienced true peace and joy. These are the marks of those who live in communion with the Creator. The Bible tells us, "Draw near to God, and He will draw near to you." This means that the invitation for a deeper relationship is always open, but it is up to us to accept it. If you feel like something is missing in your spiritual life, maybe it's time to get closer to God. Take time to pray, not just to ask, but to give thanks and listen. Prayer is a dialogue, and God wants to speak to your heart. Have you ever tried to start or end your day in silence, just meditating on who God is? It can transform your perspective. Another fundamental point is reading the Word of God. The Bible is more than a book. It's a love letter written to us. It is there that we find direction, comfort, and inspiration to face life's challenges. Make reading the Bible a daily habit, even if it starts with just a few minutes a day. Over time, you will see the impact on your life. Communion with God is also strengthened in worship. It's not just about singing hymns or Christian songs, but about living a life that glorifies God in everything we do. Every attitude, word, and choice can be an expression of worship. Now reflect, what is stopping you from experiencing full communion with God? Maybe it's distractions, unresolved hurts, or even a hectic routine. Don't let these barriers steal the most precious thing, the presence of God in your life. And here's a challenge. Today, take at least 15 minutes to be alone with God. Talk to Him, hear His voice, read His Word. Then come back here and share in the comments what your experience was like. Let's create a supportive community where we can encourage each other to grow in faith. If this video touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share with friends and family who also need spiritual advice for life. Like the video and subscribe to the channel Prophecies of Tomorrow. And remember to turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming content. Now, to continue your spiritual journey, we recommend that you click on one of the 2 videos that are appearing on the screen. One of them may be just what you need for the next step in your walk with God. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.